We started last week looking at John chapter 4. And then we went out and, because the American Legion was here last week, and they led us in a time out in the cemetery. But we planned, some of us had planned another service for outside because we weren't sure the American Legion was coming. We weren't sure if they were coming, which weekend they would come. And then we found out on Saturday that they were coming, or maybe it was early in the week. But anyways, and so we went ahead with what they had planned last week, but we didn't want to not have what we planned for this week. And reportedly, the Boy Scouts are going to come and help us. So we'll go ahead with our time of cemetery observation after in a little while. But we won't feel as rushed. Last week it felt just a little bit rushed. But we'll continue looking at John chapter 4 today. So we started looking at 4, and we admitted, of course, a couple of weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago now, I forget how long, that you can't really, that you want to understand John chapter 3 along with John chapter 4, because really John chapter 4 is kind of an illustration of John chapter 3, and especially John chapter 3, verse 16, right? For God so loved the world that God gave God's one and only Son, that whosoever should believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. But I also said a few weeks ago that we shouldn't just read John 3:16, but John 3:16 and 17. And it occurred to me during the week that, you know what, this story of the Samaritan woman, this is a story illustrating John 3:17 just as much as John 3:16. So let's hear 3:17 again. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So we said last week that, you know, the Samaritans, they were hated. They were despised by the Jews. We gave some of the reasons why. They had a different religion. They had a different way of doing certain things, and they believed that you worship in one place rather than another place, and so forth and so on. And also because of the half-breed nature to the Samaritans, which is an historical truth. But so this woman, this Samaritan woman, she would have been hated, right? She would have been condemned by the Jews. And so Jesus is saying not only that God so loves the whole world and everyone in it, but also that God doesn't condemn, right? That God didn't send Jesus, the Son of God, into the world to condemn. That's not why he came. Now someone, though, will say, oh yes, but is there no condemnation at all? Is there no, difference between believing and not believing? Well, then we go to John 3:18, right? Whoever believes in him is not condemned, right? Whoever believes in Jesus is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because he or she has not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. So there is judgment, right? There is condemnation, according to the gospel, of those who choose not to believe, right? So these aren't people who just haven't heard, because we know about that. We've talked about that in terms of, deepest, darkest Africa or what have you. People that have never heard the gospel, but people who have heard the gospel and have turned away from it. That's what that's what Jesus is saying in John chapter 3, that yes, there is condemnation, not because God purposes for there to be condemnation, but simply because they've brought it on themselves, right? When we say no to God, when we are confronted with the gospel, with the good news, and we say no thank you, well then we've brought that on ourselves, haven't we? So let's get back to this Samaritan woman. So she's had 5 husbands, right? And Jesus, well, first he says, go call your husband. I want to talk to both you and your husband, right? I want to share this good news with both of you. And then she says, well, I don't have a husband, right? In John 4. And Jesus says, right, you've had 5, and the guy you're with now, he's not your husband. He won't marry you, implied. And this is why, again, why she's at the well in the middle of the day rather than in the morning, right? All the other ladies, all the other women came in the morning. They drew their water at the first thing of the day. But they don't want her with them. Do you see why? You've had 5 husbands. You might have your eyes on mine next, right? I mean, that's possible. And there's reasons why, perhaps, why she's had all these husbands and so forth. And there could have been divorce, but it could have been other things too. But then she says, "Sir, I can see that you're a prophet, because you can see these things about me. You've not heard me tell you. You've not really probably interviewed anybody that knows me. I can see that you're a prophet." So then she says, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain." So she's referring to this mountain called Mount Gerizim. And Mount Gerizim is still there in the Holy Land. You see, the Samaritans are still there in the Holy Land. They're still a tribe, if you will, of Samaritans. There's very few of them, but they're still there, and they still worship on Mount Gerizim. This was where they worshiped, whereas the Jews worshipped in Jerusalem, right? And so she says, look, you guys say that we should worship, well, I should say, the woman says we worship here. The Jews say you're supposed to worship in Jerusalem. She's kind of laying that out as a question, though there's no question mark. But Jesus declares, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." Really what she's asking is, where's God? Where is God? And he's trying to say where he's at. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come that... Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, and they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. And so Jesus says all this, and the woman says, you know what? This guy's unique. And what does she say? I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And what does Jesus say in response? I who speak to you am he. Now, the interesting thing about that little phrase is there's no he in the Greek. There's only I am. I am. Now, what does I am? Who knows what that means? I am. Does that ring a bell for anybody? I am. I am.
The great I am.
Yes. Okay, so this is the name of God. I am. In the Hebrew, it's Yahweh. And Jesus says, I am many times in the Gospels, right? He says, I am the good shepherd. I am the sheep gate. Excuse me. I am different things, right? But only a couple times, only a handful of times, does he simply say, I am. And the other times he's being illustrative, right? He's saying, you know, what I do is I'm kind of like this sheep gate. I have a whole sermon on that. The sheep gate, the shepherd would actually lay in front of the sheep pen, and he would become the gate. And the sheep would be in the pen and they would be safe, and the shepherd would lie there to keep them safe. I am the sheep gate, he said. I am the vine, right? I am the vine. You are the branches, he would say. But only a couple times he says, I am. And my suggestion to you is that this, more than anything, or just as much as anything, is why the Jewish leaders got so upset. Because you see, Jews back then and even today wouldn't ever say those words. They would never say, I am. In Hebrew, it's Yahweh. They would never say it. It was too holy to say that. And they wouldn't even write it. You know, if you read in the Old Testament and you come across where it says the Lord, and it's all caps, L-O-R-D, That's where the word in the Hebrew is Yahweh. But they wouldn't write Yahweh. They would have a different word that they would insert instead because it was too holy. You couldn't say it. You couldn't write it. And here is Jesus saying, I am. Remember when Moses was up on Mount Sinai and he said, the burning bush, he's talking to God, and Moses says, look, when I go back down there, they're going to ask, now who's this God that sends you? I got to know your name. And that's what God says. He says, I am. I am that I am. In other words, you can't define God, right? He's so other. I am that I am. And so this is the name for God. And Jesus is taking it on himself and saying to this woman, it doesn't matter, Mount Gerizim, Jerusalem, doesn't matter. I am. God is here right now with you, right? So this is a confrontation. So then the disciples come back. So remember the disciples, they had gone into town, they were hungry, they went to get some food. They come back, and the woman takes off. So first they say, well, what are you doing, Jesus? Talking to this woman, right? Remember we said they broke all the rules. They broke all the rules. A woman, hey, how are you? Glad you're here. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody else yet. So, but yeah, have a seat, or are you going to meet? You guys meeting somewhere? Or? Okay, I'm not sure what the plan is. So, but okay. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Thank you. So, anyways, so the disciples confront Jesus about this, but the woman, it says, she leaves her water jar. This is verse 29. Leaves her water jar and goes back to town and says to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" And it's interesting what she's doing. So she's leaving her water jar. Now, that's the whole reason she came to the well in the first place, to get water. But she's leaving that water jar. Why? Because that's symbolic of her woundedness, right? This is her deepest need. Remember, last week we read the earlier part where Jesus says, "I'll give you living water." And she thinks, oh, I'll take some of that, right? I won't have to come here and draw water anymore. No. Spiritual nourishment is what he's talking about, right? And she gets it, right? I don't need the water jar. I don't need my human needs so much anymore. My needs are spiritual, and they're getting met by this guy. And so what does she do? She goes to the town. Now, who's in the town? These are the people that don't care much for her, right? These are the ladies who say, no, you're not coming with us to draw water. We don't want anything to do with you, right? But she goes to them. Just like Jesus is going to the Samaritans, because the Jews hate the Samaritans generally, she, as soon as she meets Jesus, as soon as she gets connected with Jesus, what does she do? She goes to the people that hate her too. Hate, maybe it's too strong a word, but it's probably not. And she says, come and see. I want to show you something. I want you to meet this guy too, right? And so then Jesus has this conversation with the disciples, right? And they want him to eat something because, they were hungry. Jesus, surely he must be hungry too. And what does he say? My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say 4 months more and then the harvest? Now that's in quotes because that's one of those idioms. That's one of those sayings. The Bible has lots of these, especially in the New Testament. Like red sky at night, sailors. Red sky in the morning, sailor. That's in the Bible, right? People use that all the time. They don't know it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible, right? And so many of these things. So 4 months more and then the harvest. Now that was, this was April, I think is the time frame here. And so 4 months more, yes, that'd probably be the harvest in the Holy Land because their growing seasons are much longer, much bigger for us. But 4 months more. But then what does Jesus say? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest now. We don't have to wait. Now, what kind of harvest is he talking about? Is he talking about corn or wheat or barley? People, right? He's talking about people. the fields are white unto harvest, right? He says that somewhere else. He says, pray the Lord of the harvest to send workers into his field, because people are ready to accept. Even the Samaritans, right? Even the Samaritans. And then it says, many of those Samaritans from the town believed in him because of what the woman said, because of the woman's testimony. Remember, what did she say? She came in and said, look, come and see. Come and see this guy. He's told me everything about myself, right? And she means the deep down stuff, right? And so that was enough for some of them. But then it says, they asked Jesus to stay. And Jesus stayed there with them 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers as well. And they said to the woman, hey, we don't believe now just because of what you said. We believe because we've tasted it ourselves, right? We've heard it for ourselves. So, what is this saying? And remember the context, the greater context, and I'll finish up next week on the Great Commission. That's our context, the Great Commission. Go in all the world and share the good news and make disciples of all nations, right? The point is, sometimes all we got to do is say, come and see. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to preach a big long sermon to people. All we got to do is say, come and see. And for some people, that's enough. I've asked you different times to invite people to church. What maybe I should be asking you to do is to share the good news, to tell people about your faith, to tell people just one-on-one what's going on, what God is doing in your life. We were doing that a little bit yesterday at the Perry Stadium. This was, they call it Patriots in the Stadium. I like it better, Patriots in the Park, but they changed the name. But so a group of us was there, and some of you helped with supplies and things like that, and helped us. I know the Brumbaughs got us a nice tent to be under, because we needed it, didn't we? It started to rain. But we would just have a conversation with people. Somebody's walking by. Marla was great. Marla had little stickers. A little child came by, hey, you want a sticker? And she just put that sticker right on them, or their clothes, most likely. And then the rest of us had these flyers. And all we said was, come and see. So we said, look, you have children there. I wonder if maybe they'd be interested in our Bible Olympics. Come and see. Okay? You might hand that to somebody else, Debbie, that comes along. There's a family that came by, and they, hey, guess what? We do a lot of neat things at Eden Church. And one of the things is our ice cream social, but here's a whole list of our things. But you come and have ice cream with us. Come and see. Come and see. Oh, and we're having the Fisherman's Quartet coming up here this summer. Come and see them. There's a flyer. You can put that up somewhere. You could hand that. And we have copies of all these flyers out here. That's all you got to do, right? Come and see. Come and find out more. Come and learn a little bit. Have some fun. Have something good to eat, right? Come and see. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything there is. In fact, you don't even have to answer all their questions. All you got to do is say, come and see, right? What could be easier than that? And I only had 3 flyers, but there's all kinds of flyers out here, and I hope that you'll take them, put them up places, or hand them out to friends and neighbors and people that you know. The point here is relationship, right? What is Jesus doing? He's establishing a relationship with the Samaritan woman, with the people that asked Jesus to stay. And of course, we would love that, wouldn't we? Jesus, stay with us 2 days. Wouldn't that be great? Well, we can't do that now, right? He's not here in the flesh, but guess what? He's here. He's here. And we can still be in the Word, right? We can still benefit from what Jesus has to say to us. And maybe that's something else to invite someone to. Come and see our Bible study on Wednesday nights, or we might change it to Thursday night. We'll let you know. But come and see. Come and see. I don't know. It's important to me. You might find something there too. You might go into a little bit more. I pray. I ask God to help me, and He always does. Come and see. Come and see. Come and see a group of people on Sunday morning that aren't perfect, right? What do we say in our Constitution? We're imperfect people trying to help you find God in an imperfect world. Well, what could be more honest than that? That's a very honest statement, isn't it? And that's truth. And Christians that aren't in touch with their imperfections, they're not telling the truth, I don't think, anyways. I'm not going to judge. But that's truth. Just, we're a group of folks and we're trying to love God and we're trying to love each other, right? Come and see. Come and see. Come and experience. Come and be in relationship with us and us with you and all of us with God together, right? Come and see. Come and see. That's all it is. And that's what the Great Commission is, right? Go make disciples of all nations. Tell them to come and see, right? I mean, maybe that's more simplistic than what Jesus was saying in the Great Commission, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Come and see. Come and hear. Come and look. Come and look for yourself. Come and evaluate the evidence. Come and, see if these folks are real folks or not, or if they're just faking it, Come and see. Come and see what we believe about Jesus, what we believe about God's love in our world. Come and see. Amen? Amen. Amen. Let's sing our last hymn, and then we'll go outside, and we're going to try and do it like kind of near the... I'll see you outside in a couple minutes. Oh, okay. Well, we're going right out. So, okay. Kids coming. You have flags. Good deal.